Good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Houston. I'm an alcoholic and a cocaine addict. And power of God separated me from alcohol the morning of October 19th of 1982. And it is because of that power, which I've come to know as love, that I'm sitting up here in my 21st year of sobriety. It's good to be back in Prescott. Joe and I were here, felt like 50 years ago. It wasn't, I think, in the mid-90s, somewhere in there, up at a camp. I think a couple hundred people showed up, and we had a wonderful weekend up there, established some relationships with people, and back, and here we are again. It's a pleasure and an honor. I want to read something to you out of a book written by a man named Anthony DeMello called The Way to Love. It's called Discipleship. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his own father and mother and wife and children and brothers and sisters, yes, and even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. Luke 14:26. Take a look at the world and see the unhappiness around you and in you. Do you know what causes this unhappiness? You'll probably say loneliness or oppression or war or hatred or atheism, and you'll be wrong. There's only one cause of unhappiness: the false beliefs you have in your head. Beliefs so widespread, so commonly held, it never occurs to you to question them. Because of these false beliefs, you will see the world and yourself in a distorted way. Your programming is so strong and the pressure of society so intense that you're literally trapped into perceiving the world in this distorted kind of way. There is no way out because you do not even have suspicion that your perception is distorted, your thinking is wrong, and your beliefs are false. Look around and see if you can find a single genuinely happy person. Fearless, free from insecurities, anxieties, tensions, and worries. You would be lucky if you found one in 100,000. This should lead you to be suspicious of the programming and the beliefs that you and they hold in common. But you've also been programmed not to suspect, not to doubt, just to trust the assumptions that have been put into you by your tradition, your culture, your society, your religion. And if you're not happy, you've been trained to blame yourself and not your programming, not your cultural and inherited ideas and beliefs. What makes it even worse is the fact that most people are so brainwashed they do not even realize how unhappy they are, like the man in the dream who has no idea he's dreaming. What are these false beliefs that block you from happiness? Well, here are some examples. First, you cannot be happy without the things you're attached to and that you consider so precious. False. There's not a single moment in your life when you do not have everything you need to be happy. Think of that for a minute. The reason why you're unhappy is because you're focusing on what you do not have rather than on what you have right now. Another belief: happiness is in the future. Not true. Right here and now you're happy and you don't even know it, because your false beliefs and your distorted perceptions have got you caught up in fears, anxieties, attachments, conflicts, guilt, and a host of games that you are programmed to play. If you would see through this, you would realize you're happy and don't even know it. Yet another belief: happiness will come if you manage to change the situation you're in and the people around you. We'll look at this one in the fourth step. Not true. You stupidly squander so much energy trying to rearrange the world. If changing the world is your vocation in life, go right ahead and change it, but don't harbor the illusion this is going to make you happy. What makes you happy or unhappy is not the world and the people around you, but the thinking in your head. You may as well search for an eagle's nest in the bed of an ocean as search for happiness in the world outside of you. So if it's happiness you seek, you can stop wasting your energy trying to cure your baldness or build up an attractive body or change your residence or job or community or lifestyle or even your personality. Do you realize you can change every one of these things? You could have the finest looks and the most charming personality and the most pleasant of surroundings and still be unhappy. And another false belief: if all your dreams are fulfilled, you will be happy, and this is also not true. This weekend, I hope that we get you to perhaps question some of your beliefs regarding the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, as outlined in the big book. Joe and I Our intent this weekend is to share with you our experience with those steps, as well as discuss what I like to call the mechanics of the steps. It is our intent to get through all 12 steps in the sessions that that we're going to do with you. I do have one question. Just give me a show of hands. How many of you have like a year or less of sobriety? Raise your hands. Fabulous. How many of you have like between 2 and 5 years? Okay. 5 and 10? 10 and 15? 15 and 20? 20 and 25? 25 and 30? Okay. 30 to 40? Fabulous. Good. Well, I got a challenge for all of you, regardless of how long you're sober. That challenge will be to ask the God of your understanding to open up your heart and open up your mind to a new experience with some things. I currently am taking 7 people back through the Big Book, and I will talk with you more about how I do that. 4 of these people have gone through the book several times. So if you have that experience, one of the things you know about that is you're now up against what is called the memory of your past experience and all this wonderful knowledge that you now have. Or I think, as their big book says, resting on your laurels. So what they asked me is, we worked with a prayer asking God to set aside what we think we know. And with almost all of them, we're up through the doctor's opinion. And in particular, about 4 of them are expecting some lightning bolt to come bursting through the... So they're asking me why they're not having some kind of profound experience, right? And I said, well, first of all, you were so asleep that the very first time you even woke up to what was wrong with you, the essence of your first step, that was a major epiphany in and of itself. And then the idea that there could be a God of your understanding, you could have a personal relationship with the second step, and you make that third step decision and do the work, and you come to know God. So I said, that's going to be profound, and you will never work the steps and have the experience you did the first time through. So I said to them, but I tell you what you've never experienced. And they said, what's that? And I said, you've never experienced what we're doing right now out of the Big Book, with God, with each other in this moment. And you don't have to worry about what the experience looks like, and you don't have to name it. So hopefully that awareness can happen with all of you here this weekend. I want to talk a little bit about where I am currently at. I live in Dallas, Texas. My home group's the Clean Air Group. I am currently going back through the steps. And I want to talk about that in a minute. I rework the first 9 steps every year. And I'll tell you why I do that. I do that because I like the effect that it produces. I do as much with the disciplines of 10, 11 as anyone I know, and sometimes I fall asleep. And I get resentful, and my fears begin to build up, and those kinds of things. And the other thing that I have found over the years, the willingness that I demonstrate in my life on a daily basis is fueled always by my first step experience and my connection to that first step. In my 21st year, I am very current with my first step, which is to drink is to die. If my experience over the years is if you lose your first step connection, it will show up in a course of action that you will very subtly and slowly begin to take. And I can tell you what it looks like. We've heard it before. People that have relapsed. How many people in here have relapse history? Raise your hands. Okay. See if this fits. You first of all begin to decrease the number of meetings that you go to. You do not call your sponsor, if you even had one, with the frequency that you used to, and you begin to hedge on the truth. You begin to lose a sense of conscious contact. You know that sense of peace that comes when you've known God. Your life situation, which is where you work and your relationships and the money in your pocket and your physical body, begins to take on more meaning to you. And you begin to react to life. You're probably not working with the disciplines of 10 and 11, probably cutting back on meditation or not doing meditation at all, doing some prayers, and you begin to cut back on those. And normally there's a process you go through, and then something in the life situation happens, and your mind says, I know something that'll take the pain away, and it's called a drink, and you pick up a drink. My experience with all of that is this. The course of action I have taken today is predicated on my connection with my first step, and that's not an old memory of what it used to be like when I was drinking 21 years ago. That's a very current experience with what it possibly could be like if I picked up a drink again. So that's the other reason I love to rework the first 9 steps is A, I miss some stuff. B, I reconnect with that first step. I get opened up to the second step that maybe there's much more about God that I know nothing about and have no experience with. My third step is a decision to go for that experience. I write inventory and I begin to see that there are some resentments. Those of you that have some time sober, you have experience with this. They call it spiritual pride, in which you get so spiritually fit nothing bothers you anymore, you know. One time I was going back through the steps, this is probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I was so spiritually fit that when I got to inventory I couldn't find any resentment. So this lady had been sober a long time, said, well, why don't you make a list of people who annoy you? And somewhere between 30 and 40 names rolled off my pen. So, you know, the same challenge applies to some of you who've been sober a long time. I've never met an enlightened drunk. I just don't think it's going to happen. So we still got to deal with our mind and those kinds of things. You know, and then the incredible 5th step promises I get to experience. Who wouldn't want to experience 5th step promises a minimum of once a year? And I like to do multiple 5th steps. I'm going to talk to you about that and why I like to do that. 6th step, identifying the defects of character that are active in my life now. That are active in my life now. The things that create misery and unhappiness in me and others, because I imagine you're like me, you're not going to suffer alone. See, I don't suffer alone. I never have. I don't know as if I ever will. I really like to make sure that people around me get to participate in that. 7th step is, again, regardless of how long I'm sober, coming to God and I see these defects. Regardless of my intent, my great love of God, my great love of you, wanting to do the right thing, and I'm seeing these defects, right? Making a list. The harm's different. You know, you're not sticking guns in people's faces, and the harm is different, but harm is harm, and I don't know as if it has degrees, right? I discovered as I got into a little bit of time my dishonesty. I used to just lie directly, and then my ego got trickier, and then I just began to lie by omission, right? Ego still operates in the same fashion. It just has a different look to it. It's craftier. And there's always amends. I always find amends that I have to make. And then what that does is that catapults me back into the 10th and 11th step, but now it's whole new ground. Amazing stuff in the 10th step. Amazing stuff in the 11th step. They're like an abyss. And every time back through the work, belief systems like I was just reading about on discipleship, belief systems I've been living my life on once again get shattered. And I'm freer. And my consciousness, the way I experience myself and you and my world, has broadened and widened and deepened. And there's more power in my life. And there's more peace in my life. That's why I rework the first 9 steps once a year. I was talking to a gentleman today, and I know some people that have time will do this. They'll just go back and write inventory. But I didn't start with the 4th step. I started with the first step. So whether you're here with very little time sober or long time sober, I am very glad that you're here. Ask God to help you stay here all weekend, to give you the power to stay here, to go through this experience. Over the years, I've gone to a lot of different things, monasteries and weekends like this. I'm no different than any of you. There's a part of me that really thinks it really knows a lot, and it becomes difficult to sit. Most of the things that have been in my highest good, it's been very difficult for me to experience because another part of me just doesn't want anything to do with that. So that's all I got for now.
Good evening. My name is Joe Hawk, and I'm an alcoholic. I have a prayer, too, I'd like to read. God, we invite you into this room to guide and direct each of us as we seek your truth. Father, please set aside within each of us that which would block us off from the truth. Lay aside our prejudices about what we think we know about this process, this weekend, and our own spiritual condition. Remove our fears, Lord, that we may hear your truth through the members of this group. Give us the strength and courage to share your truth with each other in the spirit of love and compassion for our fellow man. Amen. It's good to be here. We've done 3 of these in the last 5 years, and that was after I spent 5 years in India. And the last 2, one was in California, one was in New York. I had a hard time opening this book. Of course, Mark covers it really well, and then I would share my experience. And there's a part of me that wants to challenge myself to try and do that again, because the last 2 times it felt like if I opened to the title page, it would be trying to return to something that was old. And I don't want to be old. I know it's inevitable, and I can't defeat my own ego, and I can't make what I would like happen here. But there comes a time when you're taken past the Word, but when you're taken past the Word and you begin to experience the Spirit of the Word, you have to remember where you were, and that there are people that through the Word in this book will find that same kind of spirit. So what I did was I visited my sponsor in Denver in August, and he had a book that I gave him 6 years ago, and he gave it back to me and said that I could use this book again. And this is the book that I carried the first 10 years of my sobriety, and I'm going to use that book this weekend. Probably doesn't mean much to anybody here, but it's quite special for me to even have this book again. I got sober in Denver, August 1982, way before Mark did. Same treatment center. He came along when I was a graduate, and I was taking patients to meetings, and my sponsor later told me that was carrying people to the message, not carrying the message to anyone. I didn't have a message. I had a car. There's a big difference between having a message and having a car, or taking people to the message or carrying the message yourself. I had no experience. Took me 6 months in this program to hit bottom with the second half of step 1, and I've been doing the work ever since. I've had a year in between finishing amends. I've had a year and a half. This last time was 2 years. So I was 5 years in Denver. I was 10 years in Santa Monica. I was 5 years in northern India, and I didn't plan that. I went for a 2-month visit, and I'm alcoholic. I always stay longer than I should, and I arrive early. I left Los Angeles to get here Wednesday. And I stayed in India for 5 years, and I got to be a part of starting a drug and alcohol treatment program for the Tibetan government for the first time in their history. And I don't know how that happens for a guy like me. And now I've been back for just over a year. And I got back, and I didn't transcend alcoholism, no matter who my teacher might have been. I've had some great spiritual teachers. And I just can't seem to transcend alcoholism. And I guess for a guy like me, that's a blessing, because if I had, you'd probably be coming to India to my ashram rather than me coming to your ashram. You know, God has always known better what I need than I do. So I got back last January 2002 and started to pray about where was I supposed to be. Lots of places to go, but I prayed about who might be doing something that I would feel passionate about. And some names came, and two were not evident, and one was Mark. And when I knew I was going to Texas for a period of time, I asked him if he would take me through the work. That experience I'd like to talk about later in the weekend. So we're both in our 21st year, and we're glad to be here. And I always need to keep in mind, because I think my sponsor, almost 21 years ago, had that in mind when he came to the basement of a treatment center and carried the message to me. I heard my sponsor in my first meeting, but it took me 6 months to ask him. It scared me for many reasons, which I'll share later. I think if we're going to give each other spiritual consent, which I don't do freely in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's usually a dangerous thing to ask a question in AA. I remember asking once when I was new how to write inventory, and this was in Denver where they do the work. And I came out of that meeting more confused than when I went in. And one guy told me I didn't need to write inventory. He never had. But he seemed a little edgy. Another guy told me to write my life story. And unfortunately, I had tried that and I hadn't gotten any results. Another guy gave me a 140 question inventory, and I was just confused. But what an amazing thing for a new person, if you're an alcoholic or an addict or both. What an amazing thing for somebody like us to be confused. And then to admit it, because I think the three hardest words for an alcoholic to say are, I don't know. Some alcoholics say the three hardest words are, I love you. And I kind of wonder how they drank. Give me a couple drinks, I'll tell anybody I love them, right? But to say I don't know, and I've gone back and forth over the years with what they really meant. And I think they meant different things for different people. What they really meant when they said, are you willing to go to any length? Because that can either grab your ego, and you're going to say to yourself, wow, let me tell you what lengths I'm willing to go to. And then you start doing those things, and the ego loves it, and it increases your ego. It builds the ego. But I don't think that was the purpose. I think our original 6 steps, which are in our book on page 292, I believe, the first step was complete deflation. And I don't think they meant complete deflation of the tires on my car. I think they meant complete deflation of the ego. But the funny thing is, I can't do that. But a lot of people in the program will even take credit for that. I'm sure you've all heard it. I'm going to go home, smash my ego, surrender, work on my defects. I'll get back to you next week, right? I can't smash my ego. I can't bring about surrender. That's what the Great Persuader did for me. I believe behind the Great Persuader is God. I can't work on my defects. I can't, and so I was surrendered, but still, sometimes whatever there's left that hasn't been smashed, it'll hook into some of the stuff in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it took me years to realize that for a guy like me to admit that I'm powerless over alcohol and my life is unmanageable and there's nothing I can do to keep myself sober or manage my life is any length. I had to go to any length before I could admit that. And I believe if the recovery, the importance of our foundation, I believe if the recovery process for each of us does not begin with some sort of surrender to that there's nothing you can do to keep yourself sober, a lot of the things we do in AA will just increase your ego. Get up to take a chip, 30 days, tell them about the great conscious contact you have after 30 days and you've done nothing but go to meetings and somehow not drink. 90 days you might be a little more humble, but you're ready to go home and smash your ego and surrender finally. And on, and they do things. And I think they do things because old-timers are very wise and our founders were very wise. And for those that get hooked into their ego, they're going to hopefully just blow right out the top and it's just going to blow up. Or if you don't have much ego left, it's going to bring you to where you really are. I knew after 30 days something miraculous was happening because I had never had 30 days in my 18 years of drinking. I'm currently in the 9th step. I should probably say that I'm in 8 because my list is in the hotel, and I'd probably have to look around the room, but I don't think I owe any amends in this room yet. It's been an amazing time through the work. So I think if we're going to give each other spiritual license where you can ask Mark and I anything that you would like, that we also may get that permission from some of you that agree to that. So I have a few questions. These are great questions, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but these are great questions to ask yourself when you start the work, and then ask yourself again when you've taken the 3rd step and see how the change in thinking has come about. So one of the questions I would like to ask, which is these are myths. There's a lot of myths in Alcoholics Anonymous. And one of the ones that I think destroys more alcoholics than a lot of the myths, which one of our founders fell victim to and one of our founders didn't. How many in this room believe that the first 9 steps were meant to be done once and just live the rest of your life in 10, 11, and 12? Great. Our founder, Bill Wilson, fell victim to that belief and wasn't exposed to Dr. Harry Tiebout for a while. Our other founder wasn't, and was very close to Dr. Harry Tiebout and continued doing 1 through 9 on a regular basis because of a phenomena that Dr. Harry Tiebout laid out for us, and that's the reconstruction of the ego after having a spiritual awakening. 1 through 9 once did not work for me. The first time I started 1 through 9, I didn't finish amends. I left about 30 or 40 that I was aware of and soon hit the wall. I would be willing to bet that there's a common denominator among those people that raised their hands when Mark asked for those that have had relapse experience. I would bet that there's a common denominator among 99% of those that raised their hand, and that is that you went back out with unfinished amends. And I think that has a lot more to do with than you quit going to meetings. There's people all over the world that don't have meetings. They're called loners, internationalists, members of Alcoholics Anonymous. I've seen them at every international I've been to. And you know, I've met very few people that finished every amends that they were consciously aware of have that kind of experience with relapse. Another question. How many in this room believe drug addiction and alcoholism are the same? Great, we're going to have some fun with that. Let me throw one question out before we get to that. And I'll do it by using the crowd. How many alcoholics in this room could take or leave drugs? How many drug addicts in this room could take or leave alcohol? Do not get the physical craving for more alcohol. Great. I'm not a drug addict. I did drugs. That'd be like saying everybody that drinks alcohol is alcoholic. We all know better than that. There's hard drinkers that can die from alcohol, have a habit badly enough to be physically and mentally impaired. It's described in our book, A Hard Drinker. I'm a hard drug user who had a habit several times. Made up my mind, walked away. Couldn't quit drinking. So we're going to look at differences between drug addiction and alcoholism because it's a myth in Alcoholics Anonymous. If it was true, every alcoholic in this room would not be able to take or leave drugs. Now, do I mean you can use drugs and stay sober? No. Somebody always hears that there's a difference, and they automatically think, Joe Hawk told me I could use drugs, right? I'll say it on the record, right? That doesn't mean you can use drugs because you would be powerless over where they would take you, but not powerless over them the way I am. There's a difference. And if it was true, then every addict in this room would be an alcoholic. I know lots of addicts. One in this room in particular. He almost died in this program, suffering from the delusion that alcoholism and drug addiction were the same. Killed him. Damn near killed him. And he got really clear about his first step. Does he think he can drink alcohol? No. He would drink alcohol and go back to what he really likes. But please don't tell me that what you really like is your drug of choice. I love that one. You meet an alcoholic, he says, my drug of choice was alcohol. Isn't it funny, the drug that we usually say is our drug of choice was the drug you had no choice in the world over. So we've been sold a lot of myths. We've paid a lot of money for these myths. And it's time to get free. If you're willing to pray in your own way to whatever you believe in for an open mind and a new experience this weekend. Some of you might be here for information. Go back to your home group and sound a little better. Be a little more clear on the big book, but you're not here for experience. Or maybe you are. Maybe you'll have one in spite of yourself. Some of you might be here because you were required to be here. Your sponsor. Halfway house. You too can have an experience. Every time I've used that prayer, my mind will tell me this prayer will not work. There won't be much in 1, 2, and 3. And inventory you probably pretty well know now, and every single time I've been surprised. So if you would like to possibly have more than just some more information or knowledge, you're willing to say a prayer to whatever you believe in for an open mind and a new experience, we might all get past some stuff that's holding us back from an experience with God. You know, sometimes, and I'm not down on religion, but sometimes religion is a block to religious experience. Because why? Rusty and I were talking about it the other night. Some people get stuck in the Word. They miss the Spirit. Same here. I've done it. I've worshipped all the fingers that point to God and forgot that they were just fingers. Go to meetings, read the book, work the steps, get a sponsor. My first 6 months, I saw people that did all those things drink again, and I finally went to my sponsor at 6 months when I met him, when I went to him. And I said, I thought you told me those were the things that would keep me sober. He said, no, we just hoped all of those things together would get you in touch with something that's already keeping you sober. You know, we make such a big deal about turning to the closest thing to us. I'm searching for God. I'm going to look for God out there. You're not going to find Him. You might start to see Him in other people who will get you excited about searching deep down within to find the great reality. Let's try another question. How many in this room that are alcoholic or addict believe they have a choice today whether they drink or use? God bless you. You might find that every description of alcoholic or drug-addicted insanity in our big book is because somebody thought they had a choice today. The idea that I have a choice over alcohol today is the insanity of alcoholism that will take me to the first drink. I have no more choice today in a fit spiritual condition to drink than I had to not drink when I got here. Where alcohol is concerned, this book says maybe it's not true. Maybe we're going to find that this book is not true for some alcoholics. Maybe we're going to find that this book describes 4 different types of alcoholics. And maybe type 2 alcoholics can get by with just choosing not to drink on a daily basis. But I can tell by looking at you, there's people in this room that after all these years, if you chose not to drink every day, wouldn't you have made the wrong choice at least once in all these years with your track record? And if choice has anything to do with will, and you've done what's necessary to give your will and your life to God, where's the choice? How about another one? Anybody in this room believe that not drinking and going to meetings treats alcoholism? You hear all the time there's no requirements or musts in our program. How many people believe that in the recovery program in Alcoholics Anonymous there's no musts or requirements? Good. So we're going to explore some of those requirements, some of those things we were asked to do, some of the delusions that we've suffered from. Drug addiction and alcoholism are the same until I looked at my experience. Until I met a man that knew the difference, and he wasn't selling me anything. He was laying out his experience for me to look at. One more thing I wanted to read. Do not believe in anything simply because you heard it, especially from us. Do not believe in traditions because they have been handed down for many generations. Do not believe in anything because it is spoken and rumored by many. Do not believe in anything simply because it is found and written in your book. Do not believe in anything merely on the authority of your teacher or your sponsor. But after observation, analysis, when you find that anything agrees with reason and is conducive to the good and benefit for you and all, and you've had an experience with it, accept it and live up to it. One other thing I wanted to mention, Mark and I no longer operate with the kind of morality that most of the world operates on. And sometimes that makes it a little difficult to operate in the world with people who believe in good and bad and right and wrong, especially in this program. There's a morality in Alcoholics Anonymous that I believe is much more powerful than good, bad, right, and wrong. And that is, does it work? Is it working for you? I don't know if any of you saw the movie Fight Club, but there's a scene in there where they're on the airplane and one of the characters, they're both the same character, but one of the characters is saying to the other character, which is really himself, he's bragging about his wit, his sense of humor. The other character says to him, how's that working for you? That's the morality that we try to use in our lives.
Mark, alcoholic. This weekend, let the big book be the source as you relay your own experience alongside some of the things we're going to look at. I've worked in the field of chemical dependency now about 12, 13 years, and unlike a lot of people, there's a screen of hospitals and treatment centers between the alcoholic addict and 12-step. So instead of dying in the rooms, they go to these places, show up at a few meetings, you don't really get to know them, they leave, things happen. If you're a victim of the disease of alcoholism and drug addiction and do not have a revolutionary spiritual experience, you're probably going to die. That is why it is so critical that you find out your truth in the first step. Am I a real alcoholic? Am I a real addict? What does that mean? Is this me? Do I need power? Do I need a revolutionary spiritual experience in my life? This is a deadly, deadly disease. This program's been around. This book was published in 1939. It's 2003. The latest Grapevine said that the fellowship of AA worldwide, I believe, was about 2.3 million. In the United States, about 1.8 million. And I believe the average length of sobriety was 72 months. Why? Because this is a deadly, deadly disease. And if you lose your experience with that first step connection, all those things we've talked about earlier will slowly and gradually filter into your life. We have a suicide rate 75 times the national average. Sober. First step. That's what we're going to look at. We're going to talk to you about the title page, the table of contents, the forwards, the general areas of general information. You're going to start looking at step 1 in the doctor's opinion up through page 23. 33 pages of information to look at one thing. When you take a drink, do you lose control? Yes or no, based on your experience. For those of you who do drugs, when you do drugs, do you lose control? Pages 23 to 43, we're going to look at what the big book calls insanity. Joe has alluded to this. Pages 23 to 43 of the big book talk to you about the fact that you're sober, and does your mind take you back to a drink? Will you commit the most insane act of your life from a state of consciousness called sobriety? Do you have experience with that? Did sufficient reason ever keep you away from a drink? Those of you that live in Phoenix, you saw in the last day or two that a very young man was very tragically killed. 17-year-old in a crosswalk by an attorney. It was in the front page and all over the news. Anyone else see that? Read that article. You're talking about a real alcoholic who thought he had choice. Who thought he had choice. Pages 23 to 43, based on my experience, are about the most misunderstood pages of the entire book, And yet it was in those pages that I died the alcoholic death, and I saw that I needed God. And so we're going to talk about what's in those pages. The idea that the most insane thing at certain times, you're going to commit the most insane act and you have no say in it. I work with chronic relapsers. I have to assume if there is such a thing as reincarnation, and I don't know if there is, but I have to assume if there is, I was not a good person in my last lifetime. And that's why I'm working with chronic relapsers. Their 4 favorite words are I know and yes but. We just experienced one last night. Less than 30 days at one time. I can't remember. He had 4, 5, 6 years and talked longer than anybody in the meeting. That sums him up, right? And I love to ask him a question. And the question is, and it comes out of the big book, it says when somebody relapses, and then this is around the story of Jim, is they really ask you to look at what led up to the relapse. But I like to ask him the question about this issue of choice. And without exception, every single one of these chronic relapsers has said to me on the day they relapsed, they chose to do that. And I said, I am sorry that you believe that and that you think that, because somebody has never gone through pages 23 to 43 with you. And what I hope you come to find out this weekend, that if you're a real alcoholic or a real drug addict, that you and I stay clean and sober one day at a time by one thing and one thing only, and choice has nothing to do with it, fit spiritual condition. And in fit spiritual condition, it is impossible for my mind to take me back to alcohol, because there's a power between me and that thought taking place. So that's one of the reasons we're here, and we want to go back through this book with you all. We want to share with you what I like to call the mechanics and how we look at these steps. And you know, if you've been around for a while, you watch so many people die from this thing. And my experience shows me, I don't know how many people I've worked with. I'll just tell you a lot. I read something recently about statistics. I think it was a fairly reliable source, but it said that 47% of all statistics are made up in the spot. I thought, sounds like an AA meeting, right? You know. But so I want to talk a little bit about the title page. If you have your big book, if you'll open it up, I have a 4th edition. It says this is a story of many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. That's the first promise of hope that we get, and it's on the title page. If you're new, do not think that you have to wait till you get to amends before you get a lot of promises.
There's a question in that statement he just read. The question is, how many of you believe you'll always be recovering?
You remember we told you we're going to challenge some belief systems, correct?
You'll always be recovering.
How many of you believe that you'll always be recovering? Always be recovering. ING.
Well, you got to ask that when you read that page that he's on right now. Nobody that wrote this book had more than 5 years when it was published, and it hasn't been changed except for some of the forewords. And it'll say in several places that we have recovered.
This one is a beautiful one. Those of you who have a belief system that you're always going to be recovering, what I want to ask you in the course of this weekend is ask yourself 2 questions. Number 1, where did you get that idea? And 2, is it consistent with the big book? And come to your own truth about that. I have had to get rid of as many belief systems in the fellowship of AA that would have killed me as I did the insane ones I brought to AA. And that was one of them. I would always be recovering.
A lot of people think when they hear that, I'm a recovered alcoholic, I'm not suffering from alcoholism, that you mean cured. At the same time, they say we're not cured. We have a daily reprieve, but that doesn't mean you can't live in a recovered state. If we were in a smaller group for the weekend, 20 or 30 of us in a circle, I would ask those that raised their hand who said, you're always going to be. Recovery is a horrible place to be. It's wonderful the first time. If you're doing it for the first time, enjoy it, because hopefully you'll never do it for the first time again. But I don't want to live as a recovering alcoholic, always being sick, always suffering, because the founders promised us from the forward to the first edition, the first page of the first book ever printed, that you can recover from alcoholism. I do not think that I'm cured, but I can live in a recovered state.
I think over the years, the reason people don't want to, all of you know what a Concordia is? If you had a Concordia and looked up the word recovered, I believe it's used 14 times. The word recovering is used twice, and it's only in the last 4 chapters, which are about how to practice these principles in all your affairs. I have a sense that people who get hung up on the word recovering have this idea that if they tell themselves they're recovered, they'll walk away from AA. It has a whole different meaning. But let the book speak to you about that. This says that this is a story of how many thousands of men. See, I've recovered from alcohol. I'm not drinking. I haven't drank. I'm in my 21st year. Now, does that mean I'm still not doing life stuff? Of course I'm still doing life stuff. But if I lie to you today, it's not because I'm drinking. It's because I'm a liar. If I steal from you, it's not because I'm drinking. It's because I'm a thief. You follow? See, I have recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. But anyhow, we'll let the book answer that question for you as you would go through this. Now, there used to be a circle and a triangle. And I just want to talk briefly about that circle and triangle because it's always been very important to me in what I call locating myself. And I always just draw one back in my book. But that circle always represented wholeness. And inside that circle there was a triangle, and they were called the 3 legacies of AA. They were given to us in 1955. The first one given to us was recovery, and that's at the bottom of that circle. And recovery is when I take my mind, because the main problem of the alcoholic centers in the mind, I take my mind to the recovery process. You know that mind that takes me back to a drink when I'm sober? That mind? I take my mind to the recovery process, which is found in the title page to page 164. I have a psychic change. So underneath the circle and triangle and the word recovery, I always write the word title page to page 164. And the second legacy given to us was unity. That's the fellowship. I take in my mind that went through a psychic change, I take that into the fellowship. There were reasons in the early days of AA that they made you do step work before they took you into meetings. They wanted your mind to have gone through some kind of a change so that you wouldn't be bringing all your problems into the meetings, which were much more solution-based. So I take my mind, that psychic change, into the unity, the fellowship. The third part is service. You get to the 10th step. The 10th step says you have entered the world of the Spirit. I have an awakened spirit. The work in 4 through 9, face and be rid of that which has me blocked from God, from my spirit. I now have an awakened spirit. I take that out to be a service to God and my fellow human beings in every area of my life. Not just AA. In my career, every single area of my life. So I have a threefold illness. I have 3 things to treat this illness, and when I'm involved in all 3, I experience wholeness, at one-ment. You see, at one-ment, peace, power. One of the things I do with people that I work with and sponsor is a minimum once a month I sit down and I locate them on the circle and the triangle. Where are you at specifically in the steps? What are you doing with the disciplines of 10, 11? How many meetings a week are you going to? Do you have a home group? Are you involved with the home group? Are you going to group conscience? Where are you at with service? Not just in AA, not just sponsorship. Other kinds of service. Strangely enough, I find that when people are equally balanced in all 3, they are much more at peace with themselves. So that part of it has always been important to me, that circle and that triangle.
It brings us to a question. How many have believed or now believe that it's a twofold disease, body and mind? Well, I'm sorry to tell you, but the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous says that we're not only bodily and mentally ill, we're spiritually sick, and when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. My life is not unmanageable because of the mental obsession. I'm powerless over alcohol because of a physical craving and a mental obsession. My life is unmanageable because of a spiritual malady. I have a threefold disease. We have a 3-part program. We also have 3 sets of 12 spiritual principles. 12 steps for recovery. 12 traditions for the fellowship, for unity. 12 concepts of service. 36 spiritual principles. I found that I needed to get some power by doing the base, 12 steps, and that with that power I could begin to practice the 12 traditions in my life and learn about the 12 concepts of service when being of service. Here's how I see it now. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps, recovery, I carry this message to alcoholics in the fellowship, unity, and practice these principles in all my affairs, service. Unity, recovery, and service contained in the 12th step. I'm going to throw out another challenge. Many, many people in this room, myself included, my first time through the steps, with unfinished amends, I would have told you, I've had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. All I had had was a major awakening as the result of 1 through 9.5. If you're still stuck on your first set of amends, don't tell people you've had a spiritual awakening as a result of the steps. Tell them you've had a major life change and a major awakening as the result of 1 through 9.5. There's a big difference.
If you want to turn to the table of contents, I don't know, some of you who are newer, if this thought has occurred to you, but the first time the Big Book tells you that you're at a step is you're at step 3, so a logical question is, well, where's 1 or 2? And the preface and all the forwards is general information about the fellowship and AA, etc. And where you're going to find step 1 is the doctor's opinion up through Bill's story, and then pages 17 to 23 is where the book is going to look at, are you physically powerless once you take a drink? And then pages 23 to 43 is where we're going to look at the obsession of the mind. So everything really from the doctor's opinion up through more about alcoholism is looking at 2 things, the illness of the body and the mind. We use page 44, 45 and a paragraph on page 52 to talk about the spiritual malady. See, Joe talked about something. I'll use some words to describe the spiritual malady. 3 of these words come from the doctor's opinion. See if any of you can relate. Restless, irritable, discontent. Having trouble in personal relationships. Prey to misery and depression. Full of fear, feel useless, unhappy, not satisfied with my life. Cannot control my emotional nature. That is what our Big Book calls a spiritual malady. And that's why the Big Book, it's in the 60s, says, when the spiritual malady is overcoming you, you will straighten out mentally, meaning the obsession, and physically. There's a warning in there. What's the opposite side of that coin? If the spiritual malady in me is not treated, I will not straighten out mentally. Because I drink to treat all those symptoms that I just described to you. And I suspect you do the same thing.
I've had people tell me that I'm powerless over alcohol because of the physical craving, and my life is unmanageable because of the mental obsession, and that's step 1. Boy, my life must be just really manageable. The obsession has been removed for many, many years. I have a part of my disease that was in full bloom before I ever took a drink. Why was I pouring alcohol on it with such a vengeance? Every description of untreated alcoholism in this book fits me before I ever took a drink.
See, and later on the book does what I perceived at the time was a very cruel thing. You make a 3rd step decision and you start to write inventory, so you're in the work a little bit, right? Then the book makes a statement, oh, by the way, alcohol and or drugs is not your problem, it's a symptom. It's like, excuse me? This is fellowship is named Alcoholics Anonymous. I came here because I got a problem with alcohol. No, you don't. And we needed to get you here long enough, dried out, to explain to you what is really your problem. Now, alcohol will be a problem if this problem is not treated, but your problem is not alcohol.
That's when you get clear on the difference between drunkenness and alcoholism. Alcoholism is that stuff that you wake up to in the morning when you haven't had a drink. Alcoholism is that stuff after 4.5 years in this program is right in your face. Alcoholism is the terror, the frustration, and the bewilderment between drinks, coupled with the physical craving and the mental obsession. I can't keep myself sober.
We're going to look at step 2 from we agnostics through the ABCs. And then from that point on, of course, the book gets very specific about what step you're on. Tells you you're on step 3, 4, 5, etc., up to the last 4 chapters, which are about practicing these principles in all your affairs.
Could it be this simple? That after the ABCs, where it says, now we're at step 3, could it be this simple? That everything from the doctor's opinion to where it says, now we're at step 3, could be steps 1 and 2? It could be that simple. And the description of the alcoholic, the chapter to the agnostic, in relationship to my personal adventures before and after. Before the first drink and after the first drink. And sober, make clear that I'm alcoholic and I can't manage my own life. And that no human power can relieve my alcoholism. And that God can and will if I seek Him. The only 3 things I need to be convinced of to go on to step 3, they just take 63 pages to help me look at it. That's how important it is. Almost 64 pages out of 164 on 2 steps. We'll find to look at steps 1 and 2. I'd like to back up for just a second and mention just a couple things. They made a big mistake in our 4th edition. They made a big mistake. And they got to change it. They just have to change it. Or we're just all going to just keep writing and emailing and sending letters and delegates. All of them. Now, I know a lot of you are more ashamed of being sober than you are being drunk, and when you get your book, you throw the paper cover away and you cover it with something. Look what I did my first year. This could be anything. This could be a novel, right? I put leather around it, right? Somebody gave me this cover. Because there was a period of time where I was more ashamed of being sober. Everyone in town knows you. I mean, if you drank in Prescott, my God, I mean, everybody probably knows everybody, right? Do incredible, tragic things and then get sober and be ashamed of being sober more than you were of being drunk. So you throw the paper cover away and you miss one of the most important statements that I didn't find it for quite a while. And it was in the paper cover in the 3rd edition, the 2nd edition, the 1st edition. And in that paper cover, it used to say this. Not only did half the books that went out produce recovery, 300,000 books, 150,000 people recovered. 1 recovery for every 2 books. Now it says here that before the 4th edition, 22 million books went out. And only 10%. 2 million. Is that 10% of 20 million? 2 million? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Why is that? There's another part in the forewords we're going to find that they used to take you to recovery before they brought you to a meeting, and our success rate was 75%. Our success rate would probably be stretching it to, say, 15. Be careful you're not doing what the majority do in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm proud for the first time in my life to be a member of a minority, and it's not a popular minority in Alcoholics Anonymous. But you know what? I don't want to do what the majority do in Alcoholics Anonymous, because you know what? The majority drink again. 51% are not staying sober. Be proud to be a part of a minority, that the chances are better rolling the dice that God has more power than booze, that you're involved in all 3 parts of the program. But on that paragraph, on that dust cover, there was a statement before our 4th edition that used to say, the basic text, page 1 through 164, remains unchanged. This is the AA message, just as it was introduced in 1939. Let's see what they say now. 1 person, given the authority by the General Service Conference with no reread. And this is what they're telling us now. The basic text, page 1 through 164, which had been the foundation of recovery for many alcoholics remains and still remains unchanged. So a page that used to tell you what's the message. You ever been to a service conference and they're all saying service is anything that makes carrying the message possible? And you bring up what's the message that we're here to find out about carrying. You could drop a bomb in the middle of the room. It would be like, what do you mean? There's so many different opinions now about the message. At least they used to tell new people that the first 164 pages is the message. Now it's something that had been. That statement makes our big book a history book. Another guy in New York said to me, why shouldn't they say that? It's true. Once again, the big book is reflecting the fellowship. The first 164 are something you've all been criticized and chastised and called names. Names that you'd have to have an ugly heart to call somebody. Imagine using the word Nazi, if you had any conception of what that word means about somebody that wants to do what's in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that the fellowship was named after. Or vice versa. The fellowship was named after the book. Nowadays you would think it's not a popular message, doing what's in this book. They also made another mistake in the actual foreword. You know what they tell me here? That a meeting online in front of a computer is the same as my home group around the corner. And I'll tell you what, I've met very few people in this room, and looking in your eyes is not the same as sitting in front of a computer. They're going to change that too. Right? They could have said that meetings online are helpful to get in touch with us, or if you're bedridden, or if you're outside the country. But to say to new people that sitting in front of a computer screen is the same as looking at the eyes of the members of your home group, it's a sad reflection on the changes in our fellowship.
There's something on the forward of the second edition on page XVI that I always spend time with when I go back through, and here they're talking about this time when Bill and Dr. Bob met, and this has to do with this first step and the rest of the steps. Talks about the position, pay attention to this, he had repeatedly tried spiritual means, so God, right, to resolve his alcoholic dilemma, but he had failed. But when the broker gave him Dr. Silkworth's description of alcoholism and its hopelessness, step one, the physician began to pursue the spiritual remedy for his malady with a willingness he had never before been able to muster. I said this earlier. Steps 2 through 12 are acts against the will. Unless you have something like your life staring at you, you won't do 2 through 12, and that's why your first step experience is so critical. Find out your truth. Is this me? Is to drink mean to die or to do drugs? Is this me? Because you can see, if you read more about Dr. Bob's history, he'd go to church and not go to church, and he'd get dipped and dunked, and the list was endless. But he would never do it consistently, and the reason was he never had enough willingness because he never understood what was wrong with him. This is why this first step experience is always been for me so critical, why it's so important that I stay connected to it. Because it is my connection to my first step that still has me so much involved in Alcoholics Anonymous, in this book, in sponsorship, in having a sponsor, in all parts of the program. That still has it fresh, new, young, and exciting for me. But it's that first step connection.
And I think the key word in that description of Dr. Bob's experience was not only the understanding of alcoholism, it says, and its hopelessness. You ever seen somebody with a pretty clear first step, but it's not rooted in hopelessness? Like they can explain the craving, the mental obsession, and then they tell you what they do to keep themselves sober. That's the first step filled with hope. I don't know about you, but every time I left treatment, I left with a relapse prevention plan. And I left with hope. But the sad thing about my hope, it's always rooted in something I am going to do to keep myself sober. If you can prevent your next relapse, you don't belong in Alcoholics Anonymous. I'll throw that out there. Because the first step is, I can't prevent my next relapse, and I can't manage my life. If you're powerless over alcohol, there's no choice, and there's no doing nothing. You see, I don't do these things anymore to stay sober. I do these things because I am sober. There's a big difference. I have no delusions about me being able to do anything to keep myself sober. But from that hopelessness comes a willingness I never had in my life because I was out of hope. And in hopelessness, there's real hope for an alcoholic. It's one of our first paradoxes.
We're going to take a 15-minute break, and then we'll come back, and then we're going to do one more session and finish up the first step. I'm an alcoholic. Can you all hear this all right? All right. How about we take I want to read another prayer by a man named Thomas Merton. Can you hear me? Is that better? Okay. It says, my Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me, and I cannot know for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I'm following your will does not mean that I'm actually doing so, but I believe the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore will I trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you're ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. Thomas Merton. Those of you who have your big books, if you'd turn to the doctor's opinion. And I would like to mention something. I work in the field of chemical dependency. I subscribe to magazines and books that have to do with medical research on the subject of alcoholism and drug addiction. And what I find in the year 2003, everything that medical science and research can find about our illness in terms of the brain, in terms of the body, etc., all of it is in complete agreement from the doctor's opinion, which was written by William D. Silkworth, a man who came up with these conclusions based on observation. I personally find that absolutely incredible, that that's something that he came up with from a standpoint of observing us. From what I've read, this is a man who came face to face with somewhere in the neighborhood of 50,000 alcoholics and drug addicts. So he had some experience, and from those experiences he came up with some observations about what was wrong with us. And I want to talk a little bit about that. It's Joe and I's intent to get through the portion of the book that will talk about the illness of the body and the illness of the mind, and get into the spirituality. We'll do one more session. We'll be out of here a little before 10 tonight. But in the doctor's opinion on page XXVI, I want to read a couple things. Keep in mind, at this point in time in the book, we don't really know what's wrong with us. They have earlier on said that this book is going to show us precisely how to recover from a hopeless state of mind and body. So a little earlier on, they had introduced us to something that might be wrong with us. And then it says the physician, who at our request gave us this letter, has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. And in this statement, this man confirms what we who suffered alcoholic or drug addict torture must believe. That's a must. That my body is quite as abnormal as my mind. A little further on, they talk about our bodies are sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of an alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. And they introduce us to this idea that you and I have an allergy to alcohol. And further on, they say that, as a matter of fact, this allergy is going to explain many things for which you cannot otherwise account. When I found out that I suffered from an allergy to alcohol and that allergy manifested in a phenomenon called craving, that was great news to me. And here's why. I had hundreds of experiences of taking a drink, having to be somewhere or do something and not showing up for it. And I did not know why. And sometimes it really made other people angry. I have missed funerals, weddings, fortunately none of my own. One wedding I was to be best man in. Job interviews. Going to pick up money that was due me, and I take a drink and I don't go. I mean, that's insanity, right? I had hundreds and hundreds in employers saying, we're getting calls from your accounts and they're smelling alcohol in your breath, and if we hear that again, we're going to have to let you go. And I do it again, and I don't know why. And I don't know about you, but you have enough of those experiences, you really start to say to yourself, what is wrong with me? I'm intelligent? What is wrong with me, over and over again? And so when I found out that the reason I did all that stuff is explained on the next page, XXVIII, that gave me a tremendous sense of comfort. I finally got an explanation. And they go on, and because they describe what happens to me. We believe, and so suggested a few years ago, the action of alcohol on an alcoholic is a manifestation of an allergy. And so they're talking about what happens to me when I take a drink. I take a drink, and then I get this phenomenon of craving. And it said that this craving is limited to this class and never. And highlight that word never. It never occurs in an average temperate drinker. It goes on to say that if this is me, I can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And then there's some great questions I ask myself. Did I form the habit? Yes. Did I find I couldn't break it? Yes. Did I lose my self-confidence? Yes. My reliance upon things human. My problems pile up and become difficult to solve? Yes, yes, yes. And the reason I'm answering yes to all those is because when I take a drink, I break out in a phenomenon called craving because I have an allergy to alcohol. That finally explained what had been going on with me for many, many years. And they go on and they further talk. By the way, if you're in the room and you're alcoholic and or addict or trying to find out your truth, this is a great tool to begin to use to look at that. Look at alcohol and drugs separately. When you take a drink, did you lose control? Did you experience this phenomenon called craving? And by the way, if you know any normal drinkers, and probably most of you do if you've been sober a while, I love to ask them these questions. I used to use my mother. She's passed away, God bless her. My mother drank for 60 years. She wasn't a drunk. So I would ask her, like, I'd say, Mom, have you ever lost control? And she would look at me, and her eyes would get kind of big, and she would say, no, why would I do that? See? And I would say to her, well, have you ever experienced a craving when you take a drink? No. And then I'd say, well, have you ever been drunk? She said, well, of course, when I want to get drunk. And so I would take these things in the book and I'd ask her, she had a whole other response to them. And the reason is when my mother took a drink, she didn't break out in this phenomenon called craving. Now my father, her husband, did. He died of alcoholism in 1986. And I have 3 brothers, and they're just like me, and they take a drink and the drink takes them. Because of this thing, this allergy that the book talks about. And it goes on and further on tells me that if this happened to me, and it did, that frothy emotional people will not work with me. We all know what that is, right? Husbands, wives, parents begging us, please quit drinking, etc., etc. Says the message which can interest and hold me better have depth and weight. And the message of the big book has depth and it has weight to it. In nearly all cases, my ideals must be grounded in a power greater than myself if I'm to recreate my life. Bottom of this page is one of the most important paragraphs in the doc's opinion. And by the way, I'm going to read this to you in first person because it's how I read the big book. See, I don't know if you can relate to this. I'm so selfish when I read the word we, I think they mean you. So when I read the big book, I use either my name or I. So I'm going to read this. I drink essentially because I like the effect produced by alcohol. I want to talk about that effect for a minute. I found it extremely important when I go back through the steps to take a look at the effect produced by alcohol. What happened to me when I took a drink? Now, the book gives me some words to describe it: ease, comfort. And I'll tell you why it's important for me to look at the effect produced by alcohol. I also like to look at how was I experiencing myself prior to a drink. Why? Because later on, the big book's going to talk to me about a thing called the spirituality. And I have discovered when I've looked at my own experience that if the spirituality gets bad enough, my mind is going to remember something to give me ease and comfort, and it's going to take me to a drink, and I'm going to take a drink and activate a phenomenon called craving. So, it said I drink because I like the effect. This effect is so elusive that while I admit it's injurious, I cannot after time differentiate true from the false. To me, my alcoholic life, drinking seemed the only normal one. And then I believe they use some words to describe how you and I are prior to the drink. I am restless, irritable, and discontent, unless I can again experience a sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks which I see other people's taking with impunity, meaning they do not lose control. After I succumb to the desire again, my mind says, let's take a drink. I take a drink, the phenomenon of craving develops, I pass through the well-known stage of esprit, I emerge remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. I repeated this over and over and over. And my book says, Mark, unless you can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope of your recovery. Psychic means my mind. This is me. See, when I go through the big book, I'm looking at my experience, I'm laying it alongside these words and asking myself, is this me? See, we've got a wide range of ages in here. And I was 36 years old when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous. Your mind, your ego, will use everything in the world to not be an alcoholic or an addict. It'll use age, it'll use gender, education, it'll use binge drinking, sporadic drinking, you name it. It'll grab a hold of anything to not be one. And of course the reason is simple. If ye be one, you probably shouldn't be drinking. But the point I'm trying to make, particularly say for some of you younger people, being an alcoholic or drug addict has nothing to do with your age. It has to do with this. When you take a drink or do drugs, did you lose control? Do you break out in a phenomenon called craving? If that's you, I got bad news for you. You're done. Because that's going to happen to you from now till the day you die. From now till the day you die. And the doctor's opinion is what opened me up to this, what's wrong with me physically once I take a drink. I have an allergy. Or once I snort that line of cocaine, I have an allergy. And I break out in a phenomenon called craving, and I'm not going to finish till the craving tells me I'm done. And I can't bring mental control against this thing called craving. So that's why I am physically powerless over alcohol. And for me, over cocaine. Because when I take the line or when I take the drink, I break out in this craving, and I'm going to run it until it lets go of me. I don't let go of it, by the way. Now that's the good news. I know why I'm powerless once it's in my body. Now there's a downside to this. I knew 10 years before I came to AA that when I took a drink I lost control. Is that true of you? How many of you knew long before you got to AA that when you took a drink you lost control? See, you're like me. You knew it, but didn't do anything about it. Right? And later on the book's going to tell you and I why. It's because I forget that I lose control. Because I get so diseased within myself, my mind is trying to give me some ease and comfort. It says take a drink, and I have no recall. See, my last drunk lasted a year and a half. It wasn't one day, it wasn't 3 days, it was a year and a half run. And I have the kind of mind that if I get diseased, not at ease with myself long enough, it will say, you know, a little bit of vodka would be a nice thing. Or a little line of that cocaine would be a nice thing. And I can't remember that I have this thing.